Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, I got an incredible show for you today. The one and only, fighting out of the Heroic Hearts Gym in Loon Lake, Washington, dedicated to education, empowering people, healing and health through plant medicines and psychedelics, with an impressive record for triumph over trauma, inspiring healing, happiness, success, and achievement, and the highest levels. Educator, advisor, author, counselor, marketing master, the undisputed heavyweight champion, Dr. Randall Healingseed.world Hansen. Welcome to the show.
Woo! Well, George, I know we're talking about the psychedelic science conference today, so I just want to say I drank the Kool-Aid, man. Woo! And hold on 1 second for more details.
Fair enough. Well, we have Dr. Randall Hansen, who's drinking the Kool-Aid. You've seen him there. He is a changed man. It looks like the idea of psychedelic science has really gotten into him. The merry pranksters, the whole trip to Denver. Maybe it was Dennis Walker that got a hold of him. I don't know, but let's check and see him here.
All right. I'm almost done with the costume change.
The transformation is among us. The drum roll. And
Ba-ba!
there
he is. So that's the reality of psychedelic science. I think people from the outside might have seen it as this kind of hippie love fest, and we'll talk. There was definitely some of that for sure. But the reality of it for me, the biggest takeaway was, and I don't know, some people might see this as a downer. I see it as a positive thing, but it was a professional conference. It was professional. I mean, we had people of every walk of life there, really, but amazingly, so many counselors and therapists there. And it was, in fact, someone said, I saw a post on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, they were actually disappointed because it was too much like a regular conference. But to me, that was a sign of we made a really big step into moving this into the mainstream, because in any industry, there's got to be a professional component to it. Yes, there can be outliers of all sorts, but you need to have this engine kind of driving it. And the problem we have in psychedelics is we don't know what that engine's going to be just yet. And so that's the cool part too. We're struggling. We're trying to find this. We're arguing. We're debating, and we're learning. And that to me is the coolest part. I mean, it was, from Rick Doblin's opening statement, where he said, I'm paraphrasing, we're not tripping, culture is tripping. And that was like, yeah, and everyone's going crazy. But, that's the reality. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you today about it and seeing how you're doing too.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I am doing fantastic. I feel really fortunate to be here, and I agree that it's super exciting to see the way in which the world of psychedelics is being bantered around, from Dennis Walker to the boys that are pitching, ROIs and all this stuff. Like, it's so interesting to hear and see the ways in which psychedelics are changing the world. And it's a lot like a psychedelic trip. On that come up, you don't know what's going to happen. You get these butterflies, and you're like, oh man, did I take too much? Is this not enough? What's going on? And it seems like that's exactly what's happening in culture. I think Rick Doblin is right that culture is tripping, but I wasn't there, man. You were the one that was there. Maybe you can walk us through what it was like from the beginning. Like you had a nice long road trip, and you show up. Just maybe before we get into the 10 takeaways, maybe you can give us your initial feeling when you pull up.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Jenny and I, my partner and I, decided to drive out there, mostly because we looked at flights and we're like, oh, I think it's cheaper to drive. But I'm so glad we did, especially after the conference, because just like a psychedelic experience, man, we needed some serious integration after that conference. And so 2 days in nature was pretty darn good. Found some amazing hikes and just kind of breathe. And also the city, we're not city people, and Denver's a pretty nice city, but too much concrete, and so happy to get out of there. But the initial impression was So we got there Tuesday afternoon. Maps had warned people to try to register early rather than get your badge Wednesday morning. And so going in there was already chaotic on that Tuesday afternoon, but we got our badge pretty quickly. Peeked into the exhibition hall, which not that many booths were set up. I'm like, whoa, this is going to happen tomorrow. I hope they're working on it tonight. But magically by Wednesday morning, the booths were all up. And but walking into that convention center Wednesday morning the energy was palpable. I mean, you could feel it, and it was amazing. I loved some of our European and non-US people posted. There was this funny sign right by the entrance. It said something like, "Welcome to Psychedelic Science 2023. No handguns allowed." And people were like, how does this work? It seems like an oxymoron here or
Right.
something. And then people are like, yeah, only in the US would there be a psychedelic conference where they're banning weapons. But and then that opening session in this massive auditorium, and a beautiful opening piece by this indigenous woman talking about her culture and her experience, and how we should be respecting the medicine. And it was wonderful. And then Rick Doblin came out in this flowing white outfit, almost looking like like a dream, and just shared his vision. And to me, the most exciting thing he said, because it fits my life goal, agenda, everything about what I am right now, is he put the slide up, and I wasn't expecting it, that their vision after they get through getting FDA approval for MDMA is net zero trauma by 2070. So he said, yes, there'll always be new traumas happening, but if we can, between now and 50 years or so, if we can heal all the childhood trauma, all the intergenerational trauma, then by then it's just new trauma, and we can attack it as it happens rather than attacking it 30 years later when it's been destroying your insides for so long. So that was the most exciting. I mean, probably the people around me were really mad because I was just screaming. I was so excited. Like, yes, no, let's clear this trauma, because so much of the world in my mind, so much of the anger and the hurt and the pain and the frustrations come from, as we've talked about, comes from this unprocessed trauma. And if we can, and I love that MAPS is right there, because they're proven what they can do. And so I'm so excited for the future, just based on that one opening comment in that session.
Wow. Just this concept of net zero trauma, like that's enough for me to almost take a knee right there and be like,
Yeah.
whoa, I've
Yeah.
never thought about that. Like, why not? Why can't we do it? And the truth is, if you start, maybe it's just because we're so immersed in this particular community that we see the changes on the front lines. Same with the therapist or the doctors or anybody who has found a relationship with psychedelic medicine or entheogens. It seems that there is this sort of outbreak of healing trauma. I have never heard so many people in my life purge for their family. And by that term I mean solve generational trauma.
Yeah.
It seems like it's popping up everywhere. It's beautiful to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but for me, this year has been a kind of a weird season of my father, and kind of trying to really understand him better from an adult standpoint rather than a childhood standpoint. And one of the things I looked at was his mother, my grandmother, who was, ooh, boy, she was something else. She would argue at the flip of a coin, and she would take both sides. She would argue both sides. I as a kid, I remember thinking, whoa, what? She just switched sides, and my father would just switch sides the other way too, and they just keep arguing. And so to me, that's it's funny now, yeah, but and she was always comparing him to his brother. Why aren't you?
Mm.
He's a member of the country club. Why aren't you a member of the country club? And it helps me realize there's that intergenerational trauma. And then it makes me
Yeah.
wonder, wow, what happened to my grandmother that caused her to lash out so much? And she was also extremely obese. So I think that was also the food thing was also,
Right.
a lot of traumatized people eat to fill that void.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, you start looking back in your family and you realize, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on. And if we can clear all that, um, Jenny and I are both from Scandinavian families, and we joke that the rule was sweep it under the rug. There's no problems. There's no problems.
Yeah.
The rug is getting a little lumpy, but other than that, no problems.
Yeah.
So yes,
How could there
okay,
possibly be a problem if you don't talk about it?
right.
Right?
Of course, yes, of course. So I love that. I don't know why I'm so affected by it, but I just am. I maybe that's finally my empathy really growing because of the power of empathy in this space or compassion. But I just every day whether it's in person or on the news, you just see someone reacting badly, and you almost immediately think, well, okay, there's something happened to that person, and it hasn't been, so yeah, I mean, the world, it sounds woo woo or whatever, but if we look at clearing trauma, um, Ryan Roberts, who I absolutely adore, he's a veteran MBA. He posted yesterday, uh, after 40 plus years of living, he finally can be his true, authentic self, put all the mask away, and realize what a beautiful soul he has. And I I love him. I appreciate him. I said, "Hey, can I use that quote from my new project?" And he's like, "Of course." But that's what healing's about. It's it's not this woo woo. Oh, we'll all be about peace and love. Although yes, we will be all about peace and love, but it's not the woo woo kind of thing. It's because when we heal, you know, uh, we find that inner child that we've lost, that had all these goals and ambitions.
Mhm.
The kind of that joke of 5-year-olds. What do you want to be? I want to be a firefighter or
Yeah.
a police officer or whatever. But we lose that as a reality. Many of us lose that as the reality of maybe having to get a job as a teenager to support our family. Maybe it's our family doesn't go to college or all these things. So, or trauma happens, obviously, and it changes us. So, but when we release that trauma, it just transforms us. It's amazing to see. It transforms us, and all of a sudden we go back to seeing what we really are passionate about. And one of the things that most of us become passionate about is helping others heal. And so then it becomes this sort of exponential healing, because once we heal, we want to help others heal. And then, so I think this net zero trauma by 2070 is really possible, uh, with the addition of psychedelics, with the addition of really focusing on other modalities of healing, because psychedelics are not for everyone, although, and even those that they are okay for might just be too scared to take the macro journey. Um, and so I'm just so excited about it. It's not the woo woo stuff. It's just the healing really does transform you.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And when I if I go back to the beginning of what you just said in this particular little exchange, when you see someone and they're acting out in a way that seems to be angry or it seems to be frustrated, I think it's incredible that our first thought can be like, oh, this person was hurt. Like that
Mm.
changes everything. Instead
Yeah.
of someone being like, oh my God, this person's a nutcase, or oh my God, this person's horrible to be around. If your first instinct is, wow, this person's been really hurt before, that fundamentally changes your interaction with them. And in
Yeah.
your change of your interaction, just even a slight pause to think about that, that can fundamentally shift their view. If you just pause for a minute and be like, okay, this person's been hurt. I should
Yep.
treat them as someone who needs compassion instead of someone who is just, mad at the world or upset with me, because they're not upset with me. They're
Right.
upset at something else.
Yep.
That changes the way you interact with them. And just that small pebble in the pond ripple radiates outwards and it changes everything like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. Like
I
please.
love that, George. Thank you. Because no, that's perfect. Because yeah, as soon as we realize, probably in all those interactions,
Yeah.
98 or 99% of the time, it's not you, just as you said, maybe 1% you grabbed something they were going to take, the last item on the shelf or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you just, and the biggest word that came to me last year, the medicine, took the hammer and smashed it on my head, was perspective. And
Mm,
that's what it is. You just have to change your perspective away from so focused on yourself. Oh, it must be about me. That person's, yelling at me, so I have to yell back. But when you change that perspective and say, wow, that person's hurting, I wonder what I can even do to help.
yeah.
It's that beautiful ripple effect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
I've had
you.
it happen before where I've been mad at someone and someone had said something like, "Hey, how can I help you out, man? Sound like you're having a tough day," or "Hey, are you all right?" And
Yeah.
that just shifted me. I was like, "Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you know what?" And then I would apologize. You know what? You didn't deserve that. Sorry. I am having a tough day. And
Yeah.
it just whew, it's so quick. It can
Yeah.
fundamentally wash over you like a cool breeze or like a little bit of warm water, and
Yeah.
it changes your perspective.
Yeah.
It's it stokes me to think about the way in which we can heal in just that moment.
And the other
So
beautiful thing,
yeah,
Beautiful thing,
please.
George, is it drops your wall, at least for a short second, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden the reaction isn't what you expected. It's like, whoa, you're asking me if I'm hurt, what's wrong with me or how I'm doing. And so
Yeah.
it immediately drops
Yeah.
that wall. So you have this, and maybe you can expand that, but at least for immediate, you have that. There's that real person right there. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I had this idea that I was thinking about yesterday. And it seems to me that we as individuals and the culture we live in, we kind of mirror our technology. And sometimes we are yeah, it kind of seems like our technology is a mirror for us. And for some reason, I was thinking about the phone booth. Remember the phone booth? Like back in the day, I know
Yeah.
people that are younger may not know this, but it seems to me a large part of my life and maybe my generation is stuck in this metaphorical phone booth. And like, think about your life as like this big transparent echo chamber that you go into and you're surrounded by four walls. Everybody can see you,
Yeah.
but you're walled off from genuine contact. And to make it worse, there's this chained phone book in there. And that chained phone book is like, it represents everything you need, but it's chained down. And you can only flip through the stuff. And like,
Wow.
it's kind of crazy to think about, right? Like
It
that's
is.
us. We're in our own little personal phone booth, and everything we need is chained to this one mode of communication. But we need not be in that phone booth. We can just walk right out of there, have genuine contact, genuine feelings. And I don't know how I went off on that tangent right there, but I just did. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
do that to you.
Oh, I love it because I just had a conversation yesterday about phones, so it's kind of weird. But it was about cell phones, and
Okay.
again, how we are so married. I thought that maybe that's where you were going, but which would have been even stranger. But
Yeah.
we're so married to that technology
Yep.
that when it's not in our hand or our pocket or nearby, we kind of freak out because, like Jenny jokes that her entire life is in her cell phone, and if she ever lost that, where
Mm,
would she be? I'm like, well, you'd
yeah.
still be alive. So that's, it's not your entire life, but I get it. So we are, and so that becomes, this becomes a chain too. We're chained
Yes.
to this.
Yep.
And yeah, all the information is here too, but
Yeah.
but hey, let's go out and live. We don't need to be chained to that technology. But I love the echo chamber thing because I've been struggling with that somewhat. I even with all the work that I've been doing, trying to do, I still get that ego that's just like, this is what should be happening. This is what should be happening. And it's like, shut up, shut up. I don't want to. I thought I pushed you far enough away.
Mm,
But then you have to lean into that and say, okay, what's going on? And so that's the other thing I just want to mention. Is that on this healing journey, it's never going to be one step and you're done.
Right.
It's always going to be, and even if you take one step out of that phone booth, that's only one step. You got to keep going, and you might go back into the phone booth because it's a little scary out
Sure.
there. That's
Yeah.
fine. It's okay to go back.
Right.
Then make a new plan, go forward again. So.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating to think about. And I love the idea of finding ways to move beyond our comfort zone. And I think that healing, psychedelics, and this whole modality that we find ourselves in is doing that. Which takes us to this idea of what are the 10 takeaways? Like, you have a list of 10 takeaways that you, when you went to the psychedelic conference, that you went in there and you found out some things, and it looks like you had an incredible time. I saw you with Fiorella and the Heroic Hearts Project. You had your shirt on and you were out there representing. What were some of the takeaways you got from there?
Well, first of all, just absolutely love the conference. I kind of think about that phone booth. The other funny thing I thought about was you were talking about the phone booth is, as soon as you said phone booth, I thought COVID, because we were kind of trapped. I mean, I was, again, talking to yesterday about this. We were, self-isolating and literally in our own psychic phone booth in that sense.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's one of the greatest aspects of this conference was, and it probably wouldn't be prior to the pandemic, but it was, oh, wow, I can actually meet all these people I've been on Zooms with for 3 years in person. It was so cool.
That's a great point.
Yeah. But anyway, so the first one we talked about was the net zero trauma, which, again, if that was the only thing, to me, that's the greatest highlight. If we could, everyone jump on board that idea of finding healing, amazing. The second thing for me was all the people, all the stories. We had scientists there, we had indigenous people, we had definitely some crazy far out people. We had some accountants. We had just everyone you can imagine. And it was just fascinating because, again, maybe just because it's been so long that I've been at a conference, but it was just like 1,000 conversations happening all over the place. And the sharing of information and knowledge. And as someone said, you could eavesdrop in almost any conversation and you hear someone telling their journey, their story, and that's, again, the coolest part of it all. And again, I think stories are the way we are going to help people heal. They'll hear someone's healing story and be like, oh, wow, maybe I can do that too. Maybe I can heal. And so just beautiful stories that way. Back to my opening little fun sketch there. The third part was.
Oh, wait, can I jump in on number 2 real fast?
Yeah.
So with the coming together of the indigenous people and the scientific community and the business community.
Yeah.
I had heard that towards the end that there was a group of indigenous people that were rallying and trying to bring a message that commodifying something sacred is what leads to the abuse of the plants, like tobacco becoming cigarettes, the coca leaf becoming cocaine. And I was wondering, did you catch any of that, or what was your take on that?
I'm torn. Because I totally support that view. There's no question I support that view. There were definitely plenty of indigenous panels, speakers during the conference. My main thing with that was, and that's part of the struggles we have, again, where are we going with this industry? And my big issue with it was, in my mind, the protesters were speaking to the choir. Those in the audience, yes, there are some business people there, but for the most part, those in the psychedelic industry, we respect the medicine. I mean, how can you take the medicine and not respect it?
Right.
Yes, there'll always be 5% of any population that abuse things, whether it's killing the toads or pillaging peyote. But for the vast majority, Jenny and I discussed this offline, obviously, but when I talked to her about it, I said, I'd rather see that protest at um, some kind of alt right or alt uh, uh, some group. To me, the psychedelic community is so open to change, so open to new ideas, trying to figure out again the best modality of how we both respect the medicine but also grant access to the medicine. And so to me, like I said, I support that message. Again, I look at Rick Doblin and MAPS, and right now their main focus is MDMA. So
Yeah.
that's not a plant; it's a chemical compound, and yet they do a lot with chacruna and others in supporting the indigenous. And so again, I just felt a little badly for Rick and for MAPS, and a little badly for the way to end. Um, I think they did it also because they knew it would get some good press coverage, and I know it's been on Twitter and other places. So I understand it, and like I said, I support that. I will never take peyote unless I'm in some indigenous circle, which I can't imagine I ever will be. But because I respect that so much, that
Yeah.
is their medicine.
Yeah.
And if I want, mescaline, I can go to San Pedro,
Right.
which is also a sacred plant, but not as it grows a lot faster
Right.
and plentiful than peyote does. And so I think the majority of us, but there's that debate. I mean, it's the same debate in uh, how whether we legalize things, and do we
Right.
legalize all plants, or do we have a little asterisk that says, yes, all plants are legal, but don't harvest a peyote unless you're indigenous. So it becomes this kind of how do we do, and that's, I don't know. It's fascinating to me. I think it's awesome that we're having these debates.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we're respecting each other's voices, to me, that's the most important thing. As long as we're listening to each other, and I thought Rick was fabulous there. He's like, no, let them speak, and I, again, I had a very short conversation with Rick. I didn't do a selfie with him because I felt like 10,000 other people
Yeah.
asked for a selfie with him. But I just said to him, I said, thank God you are the one doing all this research and dealing with the FDA. I said, because I would be in jail if I were doing it, because I would be, shouting at these FDA people, because, these companies with big money get their drugs approved in 6 months, a year,
Right.
and we're working in decades with MDMA,
Yeah.
and we're still not there yet.
Yeah. That's well put. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring it up just so that people can have an idea of that. And I like the perspective that everybody in that community does seem pretty open. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that particular type of confrontation would be good at like a Pfizer building or like somewhere where,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Or
But
FDA headquarters.
FDA, that would be, yeah, why not be hand in hand at the FDA? Hey, they want this, we want this. Like, why not
Yeah.
work together to
Yeah.
go and fight a common enemy instead
Yeah.
of dividing the group that we have? It's interesting to
But
talk about.
yeah, but I mean, there's so much truth. I mean, even why psychedelic medicines are illegal now, it's all political,
Right.
cultural BS, and nothing to do with the medicine, and nothing to do with, and totally trampling on the indigenous who have used these medicines for centuries. So
Right.
it is something that needs to be worked on, and hopefully we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. All right. I think we got that one. Okay, what was
Okay.
number 3 gonna be?
Three. So three is, um, I don't know how much you know about Denver weather, and I know they've had a lot of spring rain because there've been some flooding. But during this conference, during the day, the weather was gorgeous. But in the late afternoon, especially one day, we had hail, crazy lightning and thunder. I thought the power was going to go out in the conference. It flickered a little bit, and so my takeaway from that is, everyone thought the psychedelics were going to, this conference was going to be the wild, crazy thing, but the weather turned out to be the craziest part of this conference. It wasn't, I mean, the conference was so laid back and, like I said, so professional, uh, except for the deep space area, which I'll get to toward the end of the podcast, because I'll save that for near the last. But so yeah, the weather was absolutely crazy, but the conference was sane. So that's the funny part.
Yeah, that is crazy to think about. I don't know. In some ways, it just seems like a psychedelic trip to me. You never know what you're going to get, and the environment around you sometimes can dictate the way in which we react to each other. And yeah, it's interesting
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was that when you walk in there,
Yeah.
were there different types of, what was the outlet? Like, was there different conference room and different sorts of, was there room A, exhibit hall
Oh my
B,
gosh.
exhibit hall C? Like, how was the breakdown on that?
Oh my, it was so crazy. Well, first of all, again, speaking of our smartphones, so they have an app
Okay.
and it could actually track you if you let it. And it would actually, if you punched in, like, I want to go to this talk in this room and hit a button, it would actually lead you like a Google Maps, lead you to that conference room. So that part was pretty trippy and cool in its own right,
Yeah.
but a little scary too with technology.
Yeah.
But um, there were actually, I think originally there were something like 13 or 14 what they called stages or conference rooms, big rooms, breakout rooms, and the auditorium, as I mentioned. But then, even on the first day of the conference, it was like, oh, there's a new stage over here, and oh, we're adding this stage over there, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So they were adding speakers every day of the conference, and it was just blowing my mind. And I was like, I was like, hey, maybe I should just sit down somewhere and open my own get my guitar and do something, because it's like every day there's someone playing guitar, or there's this one funny guy that just had a sign that reminded me of the Peanuts cartoon, but instead of saying psychologist in, it said new ideas. And it said this little handwritten sign, new ideas, and people were walking up to him, and I guess either giving him new ideas or they were getting new ideas from him. But it was just this, again, just all this trippy little stuff that was happening all over the place, outside of all these stages. But it was crazy trying to find. It was on different levels, and
Right.
um, and you just follow the streams of people. You just got into the flow and hope you went to the right place with the flow.
Man, it sounds, what was the all around vibe? Was everybody pretty jovial, or was people talking to each other, or were people, I'm sure there was a tons of different kinds of people, but
Yeah.
was it pretty jovial going through, easy to talk to people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I think the first day, as we're rushing all to get to the opening
Sure.
session, it was kind of quiet, and morning also. But after that, yeah, the conversation started, and as I predicted and loved, it was somewhat of a hug fest. People just, and it
Yeah.
was just so cool to see. Like you'd hear people shouting from across the hall, like, "Oh my God, there you are!" Because again,
Yeah.
so many of us haven't
Yeah.
seen each other in person, and so it was just, or like one time I was walking, and I was so in need of coffee, so I'm like head down, walking
Yeah.
right toward the coffee line, and all of a sudden I hear, ran, and it took like 3 rans, I think, to finally sink in. And I'm like, but the coffee is calling me. But then I
Ah,
turned, and it was this group of folks, including Charles Patty and others,
yeah.
and Adam Garfunkel, and I just went over there and we got big hugs, and so that was the vibe. I mean, yes, there were some accounting firms and business professionals that were all a little straight laced, but for the most part, the vibe was just really positive. I love that, again, changing that perspective. When I first walked in that first day, I was sort of in that business mindset. Oh, I got to plan my day perfectly. after like the first session,
Mm.
that plan went out the window. And again, that's like a journey. You just,
Right.
you have an intention.
Right.
I'm going to go to all these sessions and do all this stuff, but then medicine takes you elsewhere, and that's what this conference did.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and I could see how true that would be. Were there some specific papers that you wanted to see presented, or some exhibits that you wanted to see presented, and did you make it to those?
Yeah, the biggest one I wanted to see, they had two dinners that were add-ons to the conference, and I would have loved to do both because one was honoring Dr. Roland Griffith, who
Mm.
is a big hero in my mind. And then I didn't go to that one because I just couldn't afford both of them. But the second one was a veterans and first responders dinner honoring them.
Nice.
And the stories, Justin Lepre, his story, he was both a veteran and a first responder. Just again, we've heard them before, but so powerful in, you know, the trauma and the hurting so badly that, yeah, there's my service gun revolver right there. I could use it today, and all this pain, and yet finds a way. And he said something so amazing, and I'm dying to see this happen. And I hope he can do it. But he announced, most of the healing for veterans has to take place outside of this country because these substances are illegal, and all these nonprofits have to operate within U.S. laws. So we send them to Peru or Mexico, and Justin announced that his nonprofit, Heroic Path to Light, is going to be having healing in psychedelic healing in the U.S., and the crowd went crazy because, in talking with Jesse Gould from Heroic Hearts, one of the big problems they have is all the logistics. It's not the ceremonies themselves; those run perfectly smoothly. It's getting the veteran to get a current passport, and getting that vet off the medications, and getting the vet to the airport, and then the connecting flights, and all these issues. And if it could just be done in the U.S., and the hope with FDA changes and rescheduling, it will happen, but most people are saying 5 or 10 years, but Justin's like, oh no, we're doing it. And so I love that aspect of it. But so to me, the highlights were definitely the stories. The one session I missed that I would love, and I think MAPS announced they're going to be putting some of this stuff online at some point, so I can't wait. But there was a session, lessons psychedelics could learn from the cannabis industry.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, I really want to go to that one
Yeah.
because, and I was just having a discussion yesterday with someone. We were talking about in Washington State, cannabis is legal recreationally and medicinally, and the recreational cannabis has so much single use crap, so much plastic used. And, on one hand, it's amazing that we have these cannabis stores. We had a visitor a couple of weeks ago from a state where it's not legal, and he came in and he was like a kid in a candy shop. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And it was fun. It made my heart, it's like sing a little bit. But on the other hand, we should, cannabis, psychedelics, it changes how you see things. It's how you see the world. And we shouldn't be using single use anything in this industry. We should, because again, people throw that plastic, it affects the climate and the world and all these things. And so we have to figure out this model, because I mean, I would love the idea of walking down to my corner store and choosing, oh, I'll try some LSD today, or I'll try some MDMA.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be in these single use things. I want it to be, like maybe like the old drugstores where it was the druggist went and there's a big jar, and oh, how much do you want? 10 capsules? Okay, here you go. And in your reusable thing you bring or a paper bag or something. So anyways, I'm hoping to see what those lessons are, because that was a lot of the discussion. And there were some cannabis exhibitors at MAPS, maybe I think 4 or 5, mostly hemp CBD. But I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from that, and we're still struggling. I mean, um, I'm amazed that cannabis is not, even at the federal level, maybe, we're not, so many states have done it, but we still feel like we're stalling, not getting where we should be with cannabis. So, psychedelics definitely could maybe learn what not to do from that model.
Yeah, maybe it's like the older brother. Like they say that the first child is like the first pancake. You know what I mean? It's kind of so maybe cannabis is like the first pancake. Like, I kind of got that wrong, got this thing wrong, but this next one we're gonna get it. We'll be perfect. Wipe the pacifier off, put it back in his mouth. We're good to go.
Well, and I think there's some truth to that. I mean, the one thing that someone told me that I love is, and it's sort of a sad reason, but a positive outcome from it. But he said, what's going to change these hearts and minds of legislators is the veterans and first responders, because these suicides, you can't argue with that. And how can you deny treatment, especially since, silly as it is, being called breakthrough or emerging, even though they've been around forever. But since they are being called that, how can a legislator say, "No, let these veterans die every day"? So I think, even though that's such a sad thing that's been happening and been happening for way too long, that might be that hedge. What's that word? That linchpin that pops that door and gets faster FDA approval, faster rescheduling by the DEA of some of these medications.
That brings up an interesting thought in my mind about the cyclical nature and patterns of psychedelics and veterans. If we look back to the 60s, some of the greatest speeches that were given by soldiers that came back and were using cannabis or even psychedelics. And, I can't give you the name of someone that gave the speeches offhand, but I remember scrolling through and listening, like, oh, wow, it's impressive how that they did that. But now you look at it, and instead of it just being a handful of soldiers that came back from Vietnam that were pro psychedelics or pro cannabis, now it seems like almost the majority of them are. And, maybe it's that cyclical nature, but it's a higher tide every time. And now, the authority structure that was in place in the 60s has been receding, and that the tide has been moving forward. So I do think that the veterans are an incredible linchpin for the rest of society. I mean, they've given their lives to protect everything that they've cared about. And I don't understand how anybody in our country or any other country cannot give back to the veterans if this is something that's helping them. It just seems like the veterans are always the people at the forefront fighting, whether it's on a foreign shore or whether it's on our own shore, foreign or domestic. Here they are standing up for what we need, man. Shout out to the veterans out there.
Yeah. And by the way, we had, when I was working the Heroic Hearts Project booth, we had a couple Vietnam vets come by, and they're like, "Can we get healing?" And it's like, "Oh, yes, you can." And, "Oh, I'm sorry it's so late," but yes, it's phenomenal that these veterans are, and so many of them were, very anti-drugs to begin with. But seeing the healing of their brothers and sisters are like, hell yes, I want that. Get me on board. And now we just have to deal with there's so much demand for it, which is again why I love that there are now 8 or 9 nonprofits and dealing with helping veterans and also first responders, because they're dealing with trauma every day, almost every day also.
It speaks volumes of the level of healing that can happen, and maybe that gets us back to the idea of 2070 and healing trauma in that fashion. It's a beautiful thing to think about. You know what? If we just jump back there for a minute, when Rick Doblin came out, did they lay out like a framework to get there? Like, hey, we're going to do this by 2070, but did they lay out like, here's how we're going to go? Like, we're going to start off here.
Yeah, no, and that would be pretty awesome. And that's a good question. I should have gotten Rick's email address and asked him that, but I'm sure they'll be coming out with that. Obviously their focus right now is on MDMA, but
Right.
I would love to see that framework, and love to be a part of that work too, for that matter.
I bet you we could go on there. I bet you MDMA is like the first leg of the journey, and then they
Yeah,
have, I'm sure if we did a little digging, we could see. Oh, I see. We're this is the first half of the cannonball run, and then we're gonna go here and then here.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's beautiful to think about, and yeah, you brought up another good point. Like I hope that MAPS and the people there will release a lot of the papers that were presented, because what's the point of having all these incredible people go and talk about papers, but then no one else can see them? Hey, we're going to show
right,
up to these 20 people. Like,
yeah.
wait, what about everybody else that couldn't make it
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. I really hope so too. Most conferences do, so I really hope they do, because yeah, there are so many sessions that I wanted to get to, and like I said, went to the room and it was empty. They moved it somewhere. Where did they move it? I look at the app. No, it still says this room. Or just caught up with people, conversations, and all of a sudden you look at your phone. And, oh, I just missed that one too. So yeah,
Hmm.
I'm hopeful. And if not, I hope the individual participants will post those on LinkedIn or their website or
Yeah.
something. So yeah,
Yeah. Do you know if there's any sort of like rules or regulations that say those people can no longer present those papers until they present them there? Because I spoke to a few people that were waiting to talk about things until they
yeah,
presented, which I can understand. But I didn't know if there's some sort of etiquette or something like that that allowed them to not present it until so many days afterwards. Do you know anything
right.
about that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a conference etiquette. I don't think it's a
Mhm.
rule. I think they could do it, but I think it's just, well, this conference accepted it, and
Right,
so I should, talk about it there first. But
right.
right after that, talk to whoever wants to hear about it.
Yeah, like for me as someone who's fascinated by it and as a podcaster, I find that to be particularly irritating because everyone's like, I can't talk
Yeah,
about it until I present it. And then
yeah,
after they present it, then no one talks to them. So I'm like, I gotta go. If if you're listening to this, you presented a paper at MAPS and you want to come and present it again, look me up, come out
yeah,
here and talk to me. I would love to talk to you. But
yeah,
it must be also very difficult for the person presenting because there's all this pressure on them and they get up and they give this presentation and they get a great applause and then they're done forever.
yeah.
No one and then people ignore them from that point out.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. In a very similar way, Jenny had this. We had this great hug fest, but the conference was so frenetic and so much packed in that you had like 5 minutes to hug and chat, and then you'd say, "Oh, I gotta go, gotta go." And so
Mm,
that's the other thing about it's sort of that same let as with the
yeah.
speakers, you have that sort of letdown, like I did it, now whoa, it's over. And the same thing
Mhm.
with the meeting people. It's like, wow, this is so great, so fantastic. And then it's like, oh wait, I'm never gonna see that person. Am I gonna see that person again? And so I think that's sort of my view would I'd love to have this as I have to think about it. I was gonna say 10 regional conferences, but that wouldn't work because we
Yeah.
want to, but something smaller. Or I mean, it was so pent up because it's been so many years since the
Right.
last MAPS, it was psychedelic science conference. Um, so like everyone's saying, oh, maybe they'll do one next year, and they didn't commit to that, but hopefully something, because and maybe just to not try to squeeze so much in, because it would just be nice to have time to be with people rather than this hug. How are you? Yeah, feel
Mhm.
good. Love you. Bye. Move on to the next kind of thing. Along with trying to get into the sessions, and then if you're manning a booth, impersonating a booth, being behind there, and so it gets there's so much time constraints. That was a big issue too.
Man, when I say it like that, it kind of sounds like sometimes in order for so I get when I think about it from that angle, it sounds like there was a lot of people involved that were trying to make a lot of money. And I don't want to say that, but it kind of sounds like when you rush it at that angle, get them in there, get these people over here. We got to be successful. Okay, present your paper, get over here, do the booth, blah, blah. And then you're like, wait a minute, man, I didn't really get a time to sit down and enjoy what that person was saying. Or I wanted to see these
Yeah,
10 things. I can only see
yeah,
one. It's like going to Disneyland on the 4th of July. Like, yeah, you got to go to Disneyland, but you didn't even get to ride Space Mountain, man. You got
Yeah,
on one
yeah,
ride. You got
yeah.
a $100 hot dog.
Yeah,
But
or you're in a you want to the speaker is so amazing and you want
yeah,
to connect with them, but there are 100 people in line in front of you, and there's another
right.
group of people coming in for the next speech, and so you can't. So that again, ooh, you know what would be a cool thing to have
What?
would be having like a speaker reception every
Yeah.
day where all the speakers of that day are in the room, maybe at the end of the day, because that way, if you've heard them, you can go up to them and say, loved your speech, and can we connect on LinkedIn or wherever? That would be a brilliant idea to have something like that.
Yep.
Because otherwise, yeah, I mean, I hunted some people down on LinkedIn and just connected that way because it's like,
Yeah.
there's no way I'm going to find them again in this conference center.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. You could have a whole continuing conversation move
Yeah.
forward. It's I don't know. Maybe in some ways it's like the I yeah, I don't know. In some ways it feels like just all the serotonin invading that receptor. You know what I mean? Just overflowing. Ah!
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, there were definitely moments. And there was this one really long hallway, and that first day, a million people all streaming down because it led to that ballroom,
Mhm.
and it just looked, if you kind of closed your eyes a little bit, it's like ants, or you can have a little psychedelic experience of watching this sea of humanity going through there. And I just love that. So yeah, there are definitely moments of trippiness going on there, and overload for sure.
It would have been, what would be fascinating is if like there could be a thermal imaging of that whole dome. And
Oh,
then you take that thermal imaging of that dome to see what it looked like, and then put it up against a brainwave of somebody that's on a high dose psilocybin trip and see if there was any similarities. Because it's kind of like one acting out of the other. It's like the psychedelic manifestation of a psychedelic conference.
yeah. Yes,
That'd be
that's
cool.
awesome. I love that idea.
Man. Was there so I know we've covered a couple of takeaways so far, and we've talked about some of the speeches and some of the presentations. What about some of the exhibits? I saw some really interesting like artwork that was out there. Were you able to
Yeah.
take in any of that?
Okay, so we'll jump into that. So uh, we had the exhibit hall, and I want to come back to that, but we'll talk
Yeah.
about the crazy psychedelic experience. So um, Dr. Bronner's Soaps is this fabulous company based in California, originally from Germany. Great story
Mm,
about escaping the Nazis and all that. But uh, David Bronner and his brother Mike, the two top executives of the company, uh, are big supporters of the psychedelic space, and so they were a sponsor of this area called Deep Space.
mm,
And I meant to send you one of the pictures. I forgot to do that, but um, it was, like black lighting, crazy lighting in there. And so that as soon as you walk in, it's trippy, it's dark. And then you have all these artists, both, um, how do I describe it? Actual artists drawing, painting, sculpting, but you actually have performance artists roaming around, and then this beautiful art gallery of all these crazy psychedelic prints, beautiful. And then you had this crazy dragon in there that I later found out was from Burning Man, and there were some other Burning Man elements
right.
in there, artifacts. Uh, they had two stages in there, which were almost impossible. And I didn't get to this, but someone told me in the far back they had vibrating beds and headphones with sound therapy that you could
Mm,
just go there and have your own little trip right back there. Um, I escaped from the craziness multiple times there and just sat there, a couple of little places with comfy chairs. I would just sit, breathe, meditate, calm, look up, open my eyes again, see the craziness in there and laugh. And then, okay, now I'm ready to go back to the conference. So it was a really neat feature they had. But one of the guards told me that some of the artwork was extremely expensive and rare, and
Mm.
but definitely beautiful. So yeah, that was a really, I didn't expect that part of it, and of course I saw David Bronner there and had to give him a, give him a hug for that too.
Yeah.
But so that was fabulous, and like I said, just a neat place to kind of escape if you were overwhelmed. But they also had some talks in there, and like I said, the artists that if you wanted the woo
Right.
woo of the psychedelic conference, that's where you went, because that was the crazy part. But the exhibitors, I know we're kind of
Yeah.
running out of time maybe, but
Not at all. We're good.
okay. The there were somewhere around 300 plus exhibitors in this exhibition hall, and I would say at least a third, at least in my perception of it, were mushroom related. I have
Okay.
never seen so many mushroom companies, from selling functional mushrooms, botanical mushrooms, microdosing,
Hmm.
grow kits, uh, everything you can imagine. And I had a friend who was looking to grow his own mushrooms, and so he texts me. He's like, "Oh my god, I found the best exhibitor, and I'm buying this grow kit." And I said, "Okay, well, since I'm driving, I'll drive it
Yeah.
home for you, so you don't have to take it on the plane."
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh no, they ship." I said, "Oh, that's pretty cool."
Oh,
I said, just the grow material?" And he's like, "Oh no, they're shipping the spores too, so I can get my." He got golden teacher. They're shipping the golden teacher, and I'm like, "Okay, good for you." So again, just the openness of these discussions that we could have, rather than behind closed doors or behind the black market or the underground
right.
market. Just to be having these discussions, and uh, um, just cool. But yeah, so many mushroom companies, but and of course all the traditional psychedelic nonprofits and organizations that we're aware of were also there, and that was wonderful again to meet those people. Um, a number of business analytics and marketing plan and business plan type
Mm.
people. So like I said, that was my sign that, oh yeah, yeah, and there's a company doing professional headshots for people. So it's like, ah, yes, we're again these little signs of, uplifting the
Right.
industry to another level, which is, in my mind, again, both a little scary, because what is that level, but
Right.
also something that has to happen, because this industry, we have to move forward. It can't be this little cottage industry. We have to, in whatever method we're taking it, and that's still, we're still debating that, but whatever method we take it, it has to get beyond where we are now in this little circle, because again, for the healing, for discovering who we really are meant to be, unless we've done our healing journeys in other ways. But for those, look at you, George.
Yeah.
I well, I always will love you, because you were the first podcast I did, and you were also the most interested podcast person ever, and have now become a friend.
Yeah.
And uh but but look at you. I love that, you're on this healing journey. You have a career, and you're okay with it. You're happy with it. You have uh, great people on your route, and they appreciate your work and your service. But then as you continue on this healing journey, you're like, wait, this doesn't really satisfy me. It doesn't fulfill me. This is not what I want to be doing. Speaking to people, having these
Yeah.
in-depth conversations. This is what I wanted. This is my, and so this is what, again, I don't know how I, can't shout this or say this in a different way, but that's the amazing thing to me about a healing journey is, you say, I want real meaning in my life, and I need to
Mhm.
find what that avenue is. And for you, with your gift of intelligence and personality, uh, and curiosity, you found this. And I love this, and I laud this, because again, we need these voices. And I love how
Mhm.
eclectic I mean, I love that you were like, I look at, today, George, who the heck is George speaking with? And whoa, I love that aspect because, again, all these, we know this from our healing journey and growing consciousness. All these things are interconnected in one way or
Yeah.
another. They are. And we just need to find those pieces and understand that. But anyway, not to pat your back too much, but that's what a healing journey is about. It's about just discovering your true self and realizing that trauma that happened to you that maybe you had even forgotten about, but have rediscovered, doesn't have to define you. And you also see, whoa, how it has defined me. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
like that. I don't like that. I look back at my healing journey and
Right.
there were moments where I'm really embarrassed by the crap I did, but I was so deep in trauma that I literally did not care if I hurt people because if I got what I needed.
Hmm.
And so I guess that's why I'm also so passionate about it because I've experienced that in my own life.
Yeah.
We have all been traumatized, and probably most of us have hurt people because of our trauma in one way or another, either accidentally or on purpose because we were so angry that we just had to lash out. But when we heal, all that goes away, and we find what we want to do, and hopefully, and I know this sounds a little woo-woo, but to people out there, but I think there's a sense that the universe, God, creator, consciousness, whatever we want to call it, will provide for us. Like, I know we've talked about this a little offline, but and I have other friends, same thing, like that are going into the space and saying, I have faith that
Yeah.
this will take off, and I don't need to be rich from it, but I just need to be able to provide for my family, pay my mortgage, car payment, whatever. And that's all I need. I don't need that $1 million house in Malibu. I don't need, the
Yeah.
G4 or whatever private plane. I just need to have a feeling that I am accomplishing something and I am doing something that's helping people. And your discussions are helping people. And you're learning and you're
Yeah.
growing. So you're actually continuing your journey, which is crazy too. And that's why, again, this whole psychedelic back to the conference, we were all integrating our lives with each other in that conference. And again,
Yeah.
now still afterwards, because that's what it's all about. It's continually evaluating, okay, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? What can I do better? I just had I just, took a bad step back in my healing journey. Okay, how can I get back on course? That's all part of this integration process that I don't know, we should probably just call it living, but because that's really, when I first got into
Yeah.
psychedelics, people were like, oh yeah, you need to integrate. Oh, what's integration? Oh, a couple sessions where you talk about, what you learned in your journey and how you're going to incorporate your life. A couple sessions. Okay. No, not at all. It's the rest of your life,
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. I've it's interesting when I look at your profile and I see INFJ. I'm an ENFJ. So like we're so connected in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that when we talk about integration and psychedelics and the medicine in our journey, what I have come to realize over the last few years and as my relationship with psychedelics has begun to mature and be like a marriage in a lot of ways. Like I'm married to the medicine, and there's so many lessons that I learned. And one of them is that integration means me becoming more like the medicine. Like if I want to understand how to integrate, then I need to do for the people around me what the medicine does for me.
Yeah.
And that means giving other people insights or a different perspective on how they see themselves. Because that's a lot of what that medicine does for me. I've been thinking a lot about this, and here's something I think that's pretty profound, that what psychedelics do is they change the ratio in which we use our senses. And for so long, we lived in this literate world where things are measured by science, and we need to find ways to quantify the subjective experience. It's very difficult to do because we don't have tools for that. There's no way to measure non-Euclidean space, but somehow we've used language to do it, and that's why language doesn't work. And so when you take psychedelics, what you're doing is you're really finding a way to encapsulate this, a more holistic approach to seeing the world. It's a unified form of perception. I should write that down. That's really
yes.
But it's a unified perception, and that's what gives you that aha moment. Oh my God, it makes sense now. Yeah, because now you've found a uniform way to look at it.
Yeah.
And I'm so blessed that you use those words to explain what I'm doing, because that's exactly what I'm doing. Like I walked away from all these things in my life that were not fulfilling for me, or they didn't fulfill me on a level that I found to be a life worth living. And not everybody can do it. I get it. And for me, it's imperative. Like, I hear something calling me and pointing me and pushing me in a direction like, this is the spot for you. And I'm like, I don't know how it's going to work. And it's like, don't worry about that. It's going to work. And I'm like, well, where's all the money going to come from? And the voice is like, do it. Just do it. It's going to work. Don't worry. And there's something that after that initial anxiety passes, like I'm filled with this sort of, I think faith is like the only real word that gets close to describing it, but it's more than that. It's like, this is it. And I can talk to so many people and I'm like, oh my God, I can see what they're saying and I can provide them this perspective. And just to be here and be in this position where I can talk to a cool friend like you that's so far away, but yet we have so much in common. And I feel like when our messages meet together, they swirl around and become one message, and then they're pushed back out into the world. And it's such a beautiful time to be alive. And I really think that what we are seeing is a changing of consciousness that is contagious. What we're doing, the psychedelic movement, everybody in this community that I've spoken to is part of this wave of change that is going to potentially change how we view ourselves, how we see the world, and heal trauma, be it generational or familial or personal. Like it's fundamentally changing everything. And it's so beautiful to me. And I'm so stoked to be alive right now. And on some level, I feel like there's a changing of the guard. And with the changing of the guard, with a new bunch of people changing over from being participants in the ceremony to being the holders or the fire keepers or the elders, however you want to describe it. There's a giant changing of the guard right now. And I really feel responsible in trying to play my part there. And it's interesting to think about, right?
I think you are. I think you stepped into that void and you are the perfect person for that. So thank you. but the other thing, when you were saying faith, and I totally agree with that, but as you were saying I was saying to myself, freedom. And so it's funny because from my healing journey, yes, it took a lot of faith and still takes faith. But for me, my overwhelming thing is I just feel free. Like you break the chains. I think you might have even said it earlier. You've broken those chains, and now it's like, but it's a little scary, right, George? Because like, oh, whoa,
absolutely,
the chains are broken. Like, do I escape or do I stay do I leave the phone booth with that, or do I stay in it? Because the chains give you some
security,
some protection, some solid ground. You might hate it, but I know where I am. It was free, but I love that freedom. I mean, I love that every day is different. And on days like today where I can speak with you and just have a beautiful conversation, and I'm not tied to so much of the BS of so many jobs that we hold that, I won't go into great detail, but I had one university I taught for where I'd wake up at 3 in the morning because they had certain rules. You have to be in the
Yeah.
classroom 5 days a week.
Right.
I'd wake up at 3 in the morning saying, "Oh my God, was I in the classroom today?" Because I know if I wasn't, I was going to get a nasty email from the university saying you weren't in
Yep.
the classroom. And I'm like, wait, I don't need this BS.
Yeah.
I don't need this crap. This is not education. This
Right.
is, just minutia. And so, that's when I really changed my, sort of embracing from professor to educator, because that's really what what drives me is the education. And so that's why I love being on your show. I love just the conference and talking with people, because that's who I am. I just want to get the message out there. But I now have the freedom to do that because of this healing journey. So
Was there
faith, freedom.
yeah. Yeah. Was there a point what was your relationship with psychedelics when you came to that realization? Like, I don't need this anymore. Like, where were you at on your psychedelic journey?
I was pretty deeply into the psychedelic journey, and no journeys did it tell me that. So, I mean, I definitely had some messages, and
Sure.
I love, same thing with you as you talked about, and I love your discussion of the senses because, yeah, I couldn't tell you how I got those messages. And it wasn't some voice on high. It wasn't, rad. I don't know what it was, but I got them. That is the crazy part. Your senses are so heightened by all this stuff. Okay, now I just lost where we were going with that.
We were talking about
So I got a lot of messages. We talked about perspective,
right.
and I got really strong messages for some letters I had to write for healing to do that sort of final apologies to people, and also kind of change the communication we were doing. So I got lots of those things, but it wasn't ever about profession. But it was just, it was, so I would say, very deeply into the psychedelic journeys that I've had and healing experience that I've had, where it just became, this is, really irrelevant. It's, I love in-class teaching or in-person teaching. I love, even though I'm an I in the classroom, that E switches on for me.
Yeah.
Kind of like now. I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, I can switch that on if I need to, but when it's all online teaching and it's all, prepackaged, and I have, 1% say in what can happen in the classroom, it just is not fulfilling and then you add the micromanagement to it.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think while it had been building in my mind, I think that healing allowed me, and then people like you and Tom, our other friend, and some others that have just joined, just said, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'm taking this leap of faith." So I said, "Heck yeah, I'm going to take this leap of faith too," because I don't need the aggravation of waking up at 3 in the morning sweating over something as stupid as that, and B, helping people heal is a million times more fulfilling than whether they know, basic business principles or whatever else that, and so that is freedom to me to be able to do that.
I love that explanation of it. And it does seem like freedom to me. And, there's tons of people that have gone before us. Oh, did I lose you there?
I lost your volume. I don't know why.
How about now? I can hear you. Check.
I got it.
Okay.
My fault.
Yeah.
My fault.
Nah,
okay, good. Sorry.
Yeah. I love the idea of freedom, and sometimes you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And I mean that in sort of a backwards way. I didn't know how chained down I was to the monotony of my life until I broke free of it. I think of the allegory of the cave, right? Like Plato's allegory of the cave, where for you're in this cave and you see the shadows on the wall, and you come up with ideas of what those shadows are. But then in some sort of miracle, you break free and you flee the cave, and you're like, oh my gosh, everything was wrong.
Yeah.
I was lied to my whole life. And then you go through this idea of like, well, I can't be too upset because I didn't know. I shouldn't blame myself. And these other people, they didn't know either. So even though I'm upset that they lied to me, they were doing their best. They're still chained down there.
Yeah.
But then like everybody talks about the allegory of the cave and how you break free of the cave. But what no one ever talks about is then you go back into the cave. Like that is, and I think that is part of the medicine too. And I think that's part of what you as an author with Triumph Over Trauma have done. It's like you broke free. You're like, okay, I'm free. Okay, let's go back in.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's where the real redemption is, right?
You have to go back in that cave and lean into the truth. So you had this perception of the truth while you're in there that for some people could be pretty close, but for most people is so far off.
Yeah.
And then you escape. You're like, oh, thank God I never go back there, but you have to go back there.
You got to go back.
You got to go back with this new enhanced understanding that the medicine gives you. And because, the classic line that I didn't get when I first was into getting into psychedelics was, you have the healing within you. You've always had the healing within you. The medicine just helps you find it. Yeah. And I never, in the beginning, I didn't quite understand that. I thought, oh, it's just a good message because we don't want people going crazy with, using psychedelics every day or something like that to keep getting healing. But, it's true. You get the message that, you're not broken. And if you lean into it, you can see in this mature brain, not as your child brain or immature brain or traumatized brain, but just as a mature, healthy brain, you can say, oh, I understand that now. And now I see these patterns that have all come from that one experience or that one, or maybe multiple traumas, and here's how I can. And if you don't embrace that, if you don't go back in that cave and really understand it, then you won't be free. I mean, you can still get out of that cave and have a changed life to some degree, but you won't have that completely changed, that freedom, unless you go back and I think about that also as surrendering to that message, but just leaning into it and understanding it. And that's why I said back to my comment earlier about my ego, that's I'm still fighting that bastard, but you have to lean into it. You have to say, okay, what's causing that? Why do I still have that? Why is that ego still getting that hurt over X? Why is that? And so you have to go back into it and look at it and now I see from that episode 20 years ago where that person did this and this happened. And then you can change because you have that knowledge now. So I love that. So, cave, phone booth.
Yeah. And you know what? It brings up another point I was thinking about. It seems that there's different windows in the process of change. And if you look at, like, say I'll take me for an example. And this is what I've been thinking about lately. Like, I've broken free on some level from the corporate world. And I feel responsible to go back and help as much people as I can. And I think there's a window there. I think on some level, achieving a certain amount of success takes you away from the front lines and the magic of truly being able to empathize with people. Because once you reach a certain level of, hey, I have financial freedom. Well, now you're no longer really involved in the struggle. Now you're no longer involved in the front lines. Now you really no longer have those friends that were right there with you that you had the same problems as. So you could talk to them, but you're like, yeah, actually, I kind of forgot what it's like to have a mortgage payment. I kind of forgot what it's like to have to get up and work 16 hours a day. I remember it, but I don't do it anymore. Right. When you don't do something anymore, you atrophy in some ways. And so I think that for those people, when you're struggling on the front lines, or if you find yourself in the battle still, you should be proud of that, because that means you're still relevant. That means that you still have the ability to inspire people, and I'm not saying that you can't inspire people when you reach a certain level of success, but you definitely become tainted, I think, on some level where you're no longer seen, or maybe that's it. Maybe it's being invisible. maybe it's the fact that nobody knows you is
Right.
what really allows you to make the change, right?
Right.
What do
I
you
was
think
going to
about that?
say, almost the same thing. They lose community as they get higher up in that
Yeah,
process. So down below, that's where the community exists, but they've
right.
lost that. So yeah, invisible, lack of community, either one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy concept. Yeah, that's why I love talking to you. I always come up with these nuggets of truth. I listen to you. I'm like, oh yeah, what about this and that?
Yay. See that we great relationship.
Yeah, it's meant to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered some takeaways, but I don't think we got through all of them. What are some other ones?
I make this joke because I think we've talked about this before, but I walk this fine line. I love, the celebrities, Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron
Right.
Rodgers was there, Jaden Smith was there, Melissa Etheridge was there. But to me, they weren't the ones I was excited about. It
Right.
was the Rick Doblins, the Jesse
Yeah.
Goulds, the Justin Lepre's. Um, but so but I love, I love that we are getting mainstream attention
Yeah.
and these because again, I'm just one little guy, as you said, in Loon Lake, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. Uh, but and Aaron Rodgers can have a big platform,
Yeah.
and so we need we need
Need
people like
them.
that. But I just don't
Need
want us to
them.
be starstruck by them.
Yeah.
And seeing the line of people all wanting to see Aaron, I get it. We're fans and all that, but I want the same group to be behind Jesse Gould, behind Rick Doblin, and say, and Rick did get that for sure. I mean, like I said, I just felt so badly for him, both at the conference and since then on LinkedIn, seeing all these selfies with him and his eyes getting, more and more droopy. But he was so gracious. Even when I spoke to him, and I debated whether even speaking to him, but he's just the friendliest, nicest guy, and I just laud that because I mean, I know he's seeing success finally, but I would be
Yeah.
so weighed down by the struggles, every day. Nope, not there yet. Nope, not there yet. Now decade 2, now decade 3. But his attitude is just so refreshing, so laid back. Again, you can see the healing within him for sure. Just as you and I have talked about this offline, and we
Yeah.
recognize different things in people, whether it's the trauma or the healing. We can see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And um, I think that there's always something bigger at play. And like, that's why he is where he is. He is the quintessential person to be spearheading this whole
Yeah.
change, and
Yeah.
I think we can all learn from that,
Yeah.
perseverance and sticking to your roots and believing in authenticity no matter what happens and sticking to your dream and
Yeah.
inspiring others. Like there's so much in there that we can learn from.
Yeah, I think perseverance is a great one. Probably we should be talking more about that
Mm,
in the future because again, so much of the pharmaceutical is here's a magic
right.
pill, and
Right.
now you feel better immediately, or tomorrow you'll feel better. And with psychedelics or any healing, it's a process, it's a journey. That's why we call it a journey, because it's not going to happen overnight, and you need to persevere, and you will have setbacks probably,
Yeah.
but there's that light at the end of the tunnel, and as long as you're heading toward that light, whether you're taking a couple steps back, but persevere. But I think we really need to stress that because again, people are thinking, oh well, yeah, I can take this, I'll do a psilocybin journey and everything will be fine tomorrow. And it's like, no. That's just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
Right.
An important beginning, but just the
Right.
beginning. So I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make sure we put that message out there. Perseverance for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting the way in which it's becoming marketing. I was talking to a gentleman that's a magician. Magic Brad is his name.
Oh
And
wow.
he's an interesting guy. And we were talking about the similarities between doing magic on a stage and magic mushrooms and the way you perceive things and how you show the crowd something and the medicine shows you this thing. And, he's never done psychedelics before, and he was explaining to me that he had seen this ad for a place in Costa Rica where you go down and you become enlightened and you're done. And I was like, not exactly like that. Not exactly like that. I mean, I think it could be a nice step in that direction.
Yeah.
And but it's just fascinating to get to see, first off, someone who is, you know, in their 60s becoming curious about using this substance to get rid of a block that they have. I'm like, that's pretty awesome. And then all of a sudden you get to see some of the marketing that's being thrown in there. Like, oh, here's a person who's just now being exposed to it, and here's what they're picking up. That must mean that this is the marketing that's out there. And once you know that, you can be like, okay, I see what's resonating with people. Let me come in over here next to you and filter out some of this stuff and give you these things over here. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing. I really do think that the changes we're going to see are not only going to be in the next generation and their creativity and the ways with laws, but also there's going to be a profound potential for end of life healing and making peace with some of the trauma that you did in the past, right?
Yeah. To me, that's such a beautiful aspect of psychedelics. You know, and I know Roland Griffiths talked a little bit about it because he's facing his own end of life. But yeah, I mean, to get that peace, you know, I ever since a kid, you know, whatever movie or whatever where you see the grandparent die peacefully in their sleep at night, you know, and it's always been like, man, I want that. You know, I don't want to die in a horrible car crash or something like that. But I think that psychedelics, you know, if you do have a terminal diagnosis, then psychedelics will give you such peace because, and again, it's just so hard to describe unless you actually do the psychedelics and have this experience, but it just changes your outlook on so many things, not only just the healing aspect, but just perspective and knowing that there's something beyond. To me, that's, I mean, the coolest thing to me, I've always been a spiritual person and had some really intense spiritual moments, not like a mystic or something like that, but just like just this sense of this ultimate power that sort of like occasionally went through me and in me, and I lost some of that with a traumatic incident in my life, but have gained it back since then. But so what blows my mind with psychedelics is when you have someone who is an atheist or says there's nothing else out there, come back from a journey and say, oh my God, I'm a believer. There is something out there. And to me, that's, so again, so back to the deathbed, or not deathbed, but the end of life. That's, you know, when we're so fearful, like, is this it? Is this the end of life when I pass? And the psychedelics show you, no, you know, we're spiritual beings. This is just a temporary place that we're in. And that give, you know, from all the research and stories I've seen, that gives just so much comfort to people to realize that, you know, not only to get the healing from their past, but also to see that there's a future for them as well, that this diagnosis doesn't define them. It just defines their physical self, not their spiritual self.
This is such an incredible point because it speaks to the very heart of generational trauma. When we have someone that we love that's an elder or older and they're afraid of death, or they find themselves, you know, they act a certain way. They act scared. They withdraw. They don't want anybody to see them. And they're working through these demons, or working through these thought processes that are, it's an enigma wrapped in a whatever that stuff is called, you know, but it's like it's a puzzle you can't solve. So you go crazy trying to solve it. And then your family sees that, and then they get scared of death.
Yeah.
But what happens when someone who is allowed to, it seems to me that when there's an elder who is allowed to maintain the dignity of dying and die on their own terms, and they're no longer afraid of death, then the child sees that and they can live their life accordingly. The child who sees someone afraid of death dying on a machine lives their life in that same way. It's like the shadow is cast upon the child, and they live fearful. They stay chained to something, whether they like it or not, because they're afraid they're going to die. But if you see your grandparents or your parents die in a manner that has dignity, that allows you to live a life without fear or less fear.
Yeah.
You know, when you start looking at it like, let me ask the people listening to this, what would you do with your life if you weren't afraid? What would you do with your life if you weren't afraid? Who would you be? Who would you love? What would you do every day?
Yeah.
What would you want to do? Because you can.
Yep.
And that's this fear of death that psychedelics, they not only show the older person, don't be afraid to die, they also show the younger person, hey, don't be afraid to live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like those things are very similar.
Wow. And wow. And that whoo, that can be extrapolated to everything, because fear freezes us. You know, you're so right. It's not just the fear of death. It's the fear of the wrong decision, the fear of the wrong relationship. And so, you know, and as you were talking, I thought about, you know, my first marriage. You know, I should have left that, 10 years before I did, but the fear of being alone, the fear of lack of community, the fear of who am I if I'm now a divorced person, and all these things, it's kept me in that relationship so much longer until it was actually my healing journey that finally said, you don't need to be afraid anymore. You know, you are healed, or you're healing. I guess we're never truly healed, but you're healing. Move on. You know, not so, you know, get some balls, whatever you want to say, you know, grow up finally.
Yes.
And, you know, and it was this really crazy moments, like you said, where you're like, well, hell, I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. I kind of want to be alone, you know?
Yeah.
And then, okay, so file the paperwork, and then that was it. But, and then just one other thing, just quickly, you know, with my dad, I know we talked to him about him a little bit, but, you know, he had cancer, he had multiple cancers. He had multiple chemotherapy sessions, multiple radiation, multiple surgeries. When he died, he looked like the people from the concentration camps. All you could see was bones. It was that memory lasted for me for about a year. I couldn't see him any other way but that, and it was really haunting to me. But you're right. I lived with that fear for many years that cancer was going to kill me, just like him. And it was a shadow. You are 100% right. Until I luckily had this beautiful doctor, GP, who said, well, what did your father do? And I said, well, he's an organic chemist. And he's like, well, okay, a lot of those chemicals are carcinogenic. And I said, he was a lifelong smoker. Well, there's number two. And he said, you know, no, your father's life does not define your life. And, you know, I never was a smoker because I saw what he did. And so, but I had to get over that shadow.
Yeah.
And that fear, it paralyzes us. So I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so mesmerizing to me to think about it from that angle. And, you know, and maybe this is the power of psychedelics. Like it allows you, psychedelics paralyze the fear in a way. You know what I mean? Like they paralyze the fear, and they just pause it for a minute so that you can get a good look at like, okay, how long have I been afraid of my own shadow? This is ridiculous. Like just stand up for a minute and see what happens. And then I don't know. I really think that there's a giant connection between psychedelics and understanding what fear is. And maybe it's part of the brain that lights up. Maybe it's seeing yourself in a third person point of view. Maybe it's sense ratios. I don't know what it is, but I know for a fact psychedelics change your relationship to fear. And I really am so thankful for that. And maybe that's what healing is. Maybe healing is no longer being afraid. You know, and there's all these words about courage or standing up or fear, but you know, I really am just so grateful for the time we live in. I'm so grateful for the beautiful people in my life, from all my friends that I've ever worked with, for all the tragedies that have come my way, and for the big tragedies that really brought me to my knees and made me ask, why me? Why? Like those kind of instances
Yeah.
are the greatest gifts that you'll ever get in your life. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but it's like Hank Foley says right down here. Let's put him up on the board here.
Hank.
Hey, so he says, I agree, guys. Living authentically includes how we exit it. And then he talks about witness Roland Griffith's calm, right?
Yeah. 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 It's a beautiful thing. Well, first of all, we both love Hank. So
yeah.
And
love you, buddy.
I will always owe Hank because Hank introduced me to you. So
Yeah.
we'll be very always grateful to him. But yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I just love Roland Griffith, but yeah, his calm, his demeanor about it. And then even in some of the discussions in How to Change Your Mind, in the docuseries, there was several of the people that had cancer and went through the same treatment, and again, the calmness they have. Hank, beautiful word. They just have this peace about them that, yeah, I know it's coming, but it doesn't have to be something I fear. It could be something I actually embrace, because I just read this. I have to give a shout out. I just read this. I've been so focused on nonfiction for the past 3 years. I'm just and I think like you, Jordan, we're just research nuts. We want to get to it. We want to read it, understand it. But I just read a first fiction one because Jeff's is a friend of mine, and it's called The Path to Perfectia. And it's so hard to describe, but he would be an awesome guest because he's hilarious too.
I'm writing it down right now.
But he just presents this just really fantastical version of that. Perfectia is kind of a version of heaven, but it's not any religious base. It's just this beautiful place where all the souls hang out. And people come to Earth to experience and live a certain story. Mm-hmm. And they don't remember their eternal souls because that is blocked from them, so they don't have conflict in their life. Like they might, like it's funny, before now with the Matrix, we all say the Matrix, but before the Matrix, when you had these little deja vu moments, you're like, yeah, whoa, what was that? And then the Matrix could have made, oh yes, that was a little break in the Matrix, but I think there's something to that those moments are like, whether we think about it as overlapping dimensions, like some physicists say, there are maybe infinite number of overlapping dimensions. So I'm talking to you on this one, right? On another one, I'm dead or whatever. Or another one, I'm a who knows astronaut. Who knows? But or whether it's that, or whether this idea that we are spiritual beings that most of the time live or exist, not live, but whatever, exist somewhere else, but come down to Earth for this novel experience. I don't know, but anyway, it's just I told Jeff it's a book that is how did I word it? I can't remember the exact words. Like you, I should write this down, but it's trickily, it sneaks you in. It starts off with sort of like, it's a wonderful life, and oh yes, it's beautiful, and then it just sucks you in deeper and deeper, and so you get caught up, and you think, oh, this is just gonna be kind of a light book I can skim, but some really interesting. Yeah, so a good book to read, and he would be a great guest to have too down the line.
Sure. Yeah, I want to, when we're done, send me all the stuff. I love fiction, and sometimes I think it's all fiction. You know what I mean? Like I start reading these nonfiction books, and I'm like, wait a minute. This whole thing right here, and it's interesting. I don't know. I'm surrounded by books, and I love stories, and I love talking to people, and it's so interesting how the same way you can see your trauma in someone you're talking to, so too can you see yourself in every book that you read, good ones anyways. And it's interesting. There's all these metaphors. We're all open books, and it's just, it blows my mind to think about.
Writing the next chapter of the book.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe even you'll have a new book coming out soon.
Yeah. Well, actually, I will. Yeah. That'd be a future discussion. We said this on an earlier podcast, but I never planned to write Triumph Over Trauma, but that was, again, the LSD told me. I mean, again, it sounds so crazy to people unless you've done a psychedelic journey, but
Hmm.
the LSDs in whatever form, my own consciousness or the consciousness of the world, or as you said, who knows? But this message was loud and clear. You are writing this book, but it's not about you. It's about these storytellers. And when I finished the book, um, you know, maybe like 2 weeks after I finished the book, Jen turned to me, my partner turned to me and said, "So what's the next one going to be about?" And I said, "No, no, no. This is like, putting a sausage together. It's not
Yeah.
really pretty. The final thing is beautiful, but the input is horrible and lengthy and tedious. And yet, about 2 months later, 3 months later, all of a sudden, I'm thinking these ideas are percolating,
Hmm.
and and it's and I think that's part of the healing journey. Also, is
Yeah.
I think you feel this, George. I,
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but almost like a wind behind me or a gentle hand pushing me. It's
Yeah.
not forcing me, but I just feel lighter. I feel like this message of healing is one I was really meant to do from day one, but I didn't learn it until a year ago or whatever. And that's the other cool thing about healing is we again just discover these things about ourselves that have been there all along, but we've either been too busy, too traumatized, too fearful to actually explore those areas. And so that's also one of the sort of neat side benefits of healing is exploring these parts of you that you never knew existed really. And but I love the sense of so yeah, so there is a new project in the works. um, and Todd Lyman is also a neat person. He's working on a book right now too. Uh, when I did the Healing Seed, because I I've always been fascinated by Johnny Appleseed because I've
Hmm.
always had a passion for nature, and it just hit me one night that I want to be like Johnny Appleseed. I want to be this person that spreads these, and just like you're doing, these little
Yeah.
seeds of healing. I'm not a healer, but I can spread the message and say, just give a little spark, like just try this or think about this way, and just give them a different perspective to life. And so the healing. So Todd texted me right after I changed my name on LinkedIn and said, if you're not giving away seeds in future things, I'm going to be really disappointed in you. And I said, oh yeah. I said, just wait, things are coming. It takes a little while to build this infrastructure. But yeah, because psychedelics will always be a primary healing modality for me because I just see the power in cutting through the BS. I can talk to a therapist for 5 years and I can control the situation and never talk about anything I don't want to talk
Yeah.
about. The psychedelics are going to say, "Oh no, you're talking about it today," and so that's what I love about psychedelics. But um, there are people like Tom DiNardo that I mentioned earlier that are finding the same healing deep, deep into meditation, uh, where he is in some totally different form of consciousness, just as we do with psychedelics. So it just brought me to this path of, well, let's just identify all the healing modalities and and I looked for books that say, there are books on yoga, there are books on meditation, there are books on breath work, books on psychedelic, but there's no book saying, wait, here are all the different ways we can heal. So that'll
Yeah.
be a future topic. So yeah, we'll talk about that more.
I'm
the,
excited, man.
yeah. The one last thing I definitely want to mention before we get distracted more about the conference, which was the most exciting thing to me was, and I was kind of caught off guard by this, the number of people at the conference that were either currently therapists, whether it's family therapist or psychologist that wanted to learn about how they might incorporate psychedelics into their practices once they
Mm.
become available to do that. And there were so many conversations about that, and it really warmed my heart because that's one of the big hurdles we have. If let's say MDMA does get approved, hopefully it will, and then psilocybin the next year gets approved for therapy, well, we need to have the therapists that are trained and legally allowed to do that. So of those 12,000 participants, a good healthy number were ones that were therapists looking to do that. And then there were also a large number of people that were, hey, I want to become a facilitator or a guide. How do I do that? And there
Yeah.
were a number of organizations there, including Be True to You, that coach, that do train people to be coaches. So that to me was really exciting because we need these people. Yes, you can do, once you've done psychedelics, you can do your own journeys. You don't need a guide, you don't need a therapist. But for a lot of people, especially the first time, if they don't have a partner or don't have a safe place, then a therapist or a guide makes sense to do that. So the more trained people we have ready when that light bulb or that you know switch flips to legal or therapy model, that the people are available to administer that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is it's a beautiful thing, and I think it speaks volumes of where we're headed and where we're at, and the date with destiny that is upon us right there. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful to think about. But Randall, as we're landing the plane here, this conversation, I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half. I feel like we've made it about halfway through all the pages in my notes, but it's always an incredible time. I love talking to you. I love you. You are an awesome person. Tell Jenny I love her, and I'm super
Yeah.
stoked on all the things you guys are doing. Before I let you go, where can people find you, and what do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. That is by far the best way. They can connect with me there. I publish a healing newsletter there about every 2 weeks with a new article, so they can find me there and join the newsletter. I'm just excited about where we are right now, George. It really hit me that we are living history,
Yeah.
and that kind of blows my mind. I mean, yes, we cell phones are part of that because I grew up, with a landline and the iPads or tablets and all these things. But those aren't. I mean, those are dramatic changes in technology. But this is a historic, life-changing thing, and we are not only living it, we are
Yeah.
participants in it.
I know.
And that hit me somewhere on the road, and it just kind of like blew my mind. It's like, it makes me feel like, again, and I don't want to compare psychedelics to the civil rights movement or things like that, because that was vitally important, but so is healing in my mind. But I just think about those people that lived that in that moment, that were doing that
Yeah.
walking those protest marches, and and they were part of history, and we now are a part of a different history, but it's still, we are participants in this, and we can make an impact, and we are making an impact. And that's all I wanted. What, like, triumph over trauma, all I wanted was, if one person finds healing, I'm happy. And I actually heard from someone that bought the book, and um, she did a psilocybin journey, and it did save her life, and she was close to taking some pills and ending it. And so and it was a friend of a friend. That's the only reason I knew, because a friend said, wow, this person just told me, the story, and you should know about it. And then I was able to contact this woman who got healing. So that's what I want. That's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about this wave of healing that we're on, this wave of 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 understanding each other better, of coming at each other with compassion rather than anger or
Mhm.
suspicion or fear.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, next time we'll talk. if people are curious, they can go to healmewhole.com, and they can find out what the next project is percolating out to be.
Yeah. Well, I got a feeling people are going to love it. And we'll hang on for 1 second. I'm going to hang out with the people, but I'll talk to you briefly afterwards.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as Rand and I did. We'll be back. We're going to start doing something regular. So at the last Friday of every month, we will be coming on and chit-chatting and telling some people about the things we're feeling and the projects we got coming up, and giving our P's and Q's on this whole psychedelic community. And so thank you so much to everybody who participated. Tom, Hank, Adam, everybody, Anya, everybody out there. We love you guys. We're so stoked that you're here, and it's such a beautiful time to be alive. That's all we got for today. Aloha.